Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome to A Time for Truth show. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, and it's a pleasure to welcome you back with us again today. Many of you have been wondering how you get the back episodes. Very simple. You go to YouTube and you click on A Time for Truth show and click on subscribe, and you'll be availed of all the past episodes and programs. And tonight we have a very special program because it deals with very important people in our lives, our children, the youth of America. And we have a very important topic. And Buddha, if you put our guest tonight up on the screen so I can introduce her to our audience, Barbara Rivera, who in 1991 was told by a public school teacher that her 6-year-old son was mentally handicapped and needed medication in order to learn. In fact, her son was actually exceptionally well behaved and actually spoke 2 languages fluently. So she took her son out of the school and began homeschooling him, along with her other children and the sons and daughters of friends of hers. Her homeschooling activity expanded to an accredited private school, Help Miami, where for over 30 years, Rivera has successfully educated children who were told by the so-called experts could not learn. Barbara has exposed the financial incentives offered to public, private, and charter schools to get children as young as 2 on psychotropic medication, and has testified in court on behalf of a child subjected to 5 years of psychiatric therapy in public school without parental knowledge or consent. She educates parents on the dangers of labeling and medications, and her work has been featured in the book Walking Targets by educational whistleblower Beverly Eakman, and she's been on numerous podcasts and Telemundo. Miami students have told their story about the horrible effects of mind-altering drugs and what a change it was for them to get real education and help at Help Miami. Her TV features have aired in 17 different countries, and she deliberately keeps her classes small, uses dictionaries and so on, and is considered an alternative school which qualifies them for state funding to help children who previously were labeled and thought that they were hopeless. So, I could go on and on and on about her, but let's bring her up on the screen, Buddha, and bid a warm welcome to Barbara Rivera to A Time for Truth show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you back again.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I want to get right to it because the last time you had so much information that you gave our viewers and the parents out there watching, and we have a very important topic tonight, so I want to get right to it and ask you, with your experience, what's the first step that's taken when they label a child in school with a learning disability?
All right, the first step is to do a rating or a checklist. I find these checklists, I'm going to show, I have a copy of one. It's like, this is called the basic BASC-2 teacher rating scale, and the parents will get one also. And on this scale, there's over 150 items that you mark often, sometimes, always, like you bubble it in. And these rating scales, I'll give you a couple of points. If the child has poor handwriting or printing, that is a sign of a mental illness and a learning disability. The school no longer teaches they don't teach cursive, and they don't teach proper penmanship. If the child says, "I'm afraid I will make a mistake," that is a sign of a mental illness and a learning disability. If the child has reading problems, it's a sign of a mental illness or a learning disability, which phonics hasn't been taught properly since the 50s. We can do that on another show. I'm going to give you enough information for 20 shows here. Has problems with mathematics is signs of a mental illness or a learning disability. And the list goes on, right? Has overly serious facial expressions. That is a sign of a mental illness or a learning disability. Then you have is too silly or laughs inappropriately. So which is it, right? And we're talking about children here. So the flaw in this, which you're not asking me that, but I'm offering, is that these scales are very one-sided. They do not ask what type of parent does this child have. Is the parent hands-on? Do they read to them every day? Or do they put them in front of a TV or on a device to shut them up? What's the food like? Are they eating fast food? Do they sit down to dinner? Do the parents argue? Do the parents curse? Do the parents allow the child to watch porn? All of these things. None of this is on there. So this is all very one-sided to the child, which I have a problem with. Anyway, that is the first step, is the teacher does a rating scale, the parent will do a rating scale. And for me, that's unfair. And then it goes from there.
Well, it's amazing because if you're going to learn something, you have to ask a question. And if you don't know something, how are you going to tell the teacher, please help me, if you can't voice that that you don't know something? That becomes
Exactly.
that becomes a learning disability when all the child is doing is asking for help and is communicating, which is, to be honest with you, I run a dental practice, and one of the pet peeves that I have is that sometimes my staff don't communicate. And so, I should hire these kids because they could come work for me in my practice and they would communicate. And that would be a fantastic revelation to have, and a relief also. Amazing. The other thing I was going to tell you, I would hate to have to answer that question about handwriting, because I guess I must have a mental disability because my handwriting leaves to be desired. And supposedly it's doctors' handwriting. So it's interesting because if doctors all have bad handwriting, which is where that saying comes from, I would suppose all doctors in society have a learning disability. Very interesting.
Well, I could tutor you on that because I have excellent handwriting, just so you know.
Well, please, you got to show me, because otherwise I'm afraid. But I don't.
Okay.
I just thought that was like so ridiculous. But please continue.
But I want to point something out. You just said you would hire somebody. Now, if you've ever, an adult, going into a new job, aren't they afraid that they don't want to screw it up? That's a normal thing. And these
Sure.
children are being labeled for normal childhood behavior. You have words like hyperactive. This is not a word that existed when I was in school.
Right.
It was known that children are more active than adults. That's the way it's
Absolutely.
been forever. I grew up with 4 brothers and sisters, and my parents did not get matching furniture until all 5 of us were out of the house, frankly. And if the house was quiet, my parents were concerned. Like, it was a noisy, busy household, which is the way it was supposed to be, which is why my parents had us enrolled in karate, gymnastics, basketball, because they were like, we got to wear these kids out. You were supposed to be active. No one was supposed to sit in a chair for 6 hours a day. No. And no one would have, like, again, you know, I was in kindergarten, I think in 1969, and first, second, third grade in the early 70s. And I recall that I had trouble with long division in the third grade. Not once did my teacher, my mother, or even the principal say I had a learning disability. They were like, Barbara, just don't be so hard on yourself. You're going to get it. You just need to practice. You will get it. You're a smart girl. And guess what? I got it. That's so right. I don't, you know, and I don't understand where we're going. Like, for my son, 2 weeks into the school year, they wanted to drug him. 2 weeks, they didn't even say, okay, he needs tutoring. Which honestly, now we're going on to a whole other topic. If the school did their job, we wouldn't need tutors. If the school did their job, and I'm being harsh, because teachers, when I went to school, were given control of the classroom. Now they're not. They have to follow a script. They have to follow what is being dictated to them, whether the children understand or not. So it's a lose-lose situation. Anyway, so back to the topic. The children get evaluated on a checklist. Then they are evaluated in person by a psychologist, and it's like a psychoeducational evaluation. And again, that's unfair. I just think it's all nonsense. So where this leads us, which I have documents with me, every state may have different terminology. So I'm going to give you Florida's terminology. This is a Miami-Dade County public school individualized educational plan. Mm-hmm. I only took a few pages out of it, double-sided, but they're usually about this thick. Can you see my camera? That thick. And it has, and I blacked it out so there's no, you don't know who this is, right? For privacy. Mm-hmm. But this is telling because and it's IEP for short, Individual Educational Plan. And this is after the child's checklist has been turned in. He's been evaluated by a team of psychologists, counselors, specialists, who all, to me, just want to shut him down. And then this is their plan on how do we educate this child, which honestly, the idea of it, I don't mind. I don't mind that we're taking an individualized approach to a child. However, I think this is abused. And when you see what is said on this paper, you'll want to scream. So this is a girl who's in the 4th grade. And she was found, hold on, let me see what they found. They found her to be at 4th grade level in, here we go, 4th grade level in math, numbers and operations, 3rd grade level in measurement and data, and 1st grade level in geometry. First of all, geometry shouldn't be taught at kindergarten level, right? And it says she's eager to learn. However, this girl's on 3 different antidepressants, 30 milligrams of Prozac a day. Wow. She is 9 years old. And the other 2, I can't even pronounce. 27 milligrams of the second antidepressant and 0.2 milligrams of the third. And that's to handle her ADHD.
Her activity.
And they find, and I'm sick. Like, it makes me sick to my stomach.
Her activity. So basically, she's an activity. She's an active person.
It's not even that they say she's active. It's just they find her, 2 of the things that they tested her on, she's at grade level. So what's the problem? Right. And the things that they're testing her on are computer programs. And these computer programs are awful. Like this one's iReady, and then there was one Reading Plus. where it basically has words go across the screen super fast and the child has to say the words and that dictates if they can read or not. I'm like, that's not what reading's about. Reading is pleasure. It's not having words thrown at your face where you say them out loud and you calculate how many words were you properly said out loud. That's not reading. That's, to me, that's conditioning. You know, that's not reading. Reading, I mean, and I'm a reader. When I was a child, I'd climb a tree with a book and my mom would have to call me down when the sun went down because I was up in this tree with the book and I'd finish it start to finish. That was reading and that was pleasure. And if I didn't know a word, I'd yell it to my mom. She'd like spell it and she would tell me what it meant. Very simple. So now more on this IEP. It says here, this is the student's priority educational need in math. And this is their goal. She'll solve grade level word problems that involve 2 or 3 steps by gathering the information she needs to solve the problems. Circling, boxing, and underlining, meaning multiple choice, which isn't math. Like that doesn't teach her to use math, multiple guess, basically. And will solve the problems with the 70% accuracy. Hold on, it gets better. When given a grade level word problem, we'll use learned strategies to solve with the 70% accuracy. When given grade level geometry, solve with 70% accuracy. When given grade level English, we'll be able to answer comprehension questions with 70% accuracy. When given grade level reading text in English, we'll understand the word with the 70% accuracy. So the best the experts can do is a C- student. And I challenge anyone on this team, which the names are here, to go get a haircut with a 70% accuracy, or get your nails done with the 70% accuracy, or have heart surgery done with the 70% accuracy, or have their child cross the street with the 70% accuracy on how to do it. It's not good enough. When I educate, I want 100% accuracy. There's no justification for less standard than that. You know,
Amazing.
When we cook, when we go to a restaurant, we want 100% accuracy on what we order. But yet with these kids, they're already labeled because they're not accurate. So instead of making them more accurate, we're saying, oh, okay, well, 70% is good enough. And it's not good enough. Now, check this out. This is the thing we can discuss. So page 10 of this IEP is accommodations, assistive technology in the educational setting. Now, accommodations, I'll tell you a little story. I enrolled a child who was hearing impaired. And the parents, upon the interview, and I have it was a 5th grade girl. They were like, we know your classrooms are small, but she's hearing impaired. Could she sit closer to the teacher? And I'm like, of course. And they're like, how much more is that? And how long do we have to wait for that to be decided? I go, what are you talking about? Your daughter is hearing impaired. It would only make sense, logically, that she should sit closer to the teacher. They said that in public school, they could not get her accommodated unless she had the psychoeducational evaluation and the teacher was given permission to move her. That's ridiculous. That's like saying I need a psychoeducational evaluation to have my 3-year-old sit at a high chair at a restaurant. Because the restaurant's not going to accommodate me unless a professional psychologist says that my child is 3 and can't sit in an adult chair. It's ridiculous. The teacher should be able to accommodate the child without needing a direction. Now check out this. I have one of them. It's like 10 things. Cue the student to stay on task. Like now, because they went through all of this process, the teacher's allowed to say, hey, let's get back to math. Hey, that's an accommodation. Not an accommodation. This one blows my mind. Verbal encouragement. Now that the child's been labeled, this is an accommodation. The teacher's allowed to give the child verbal encouragement. I guess the other children don't get it. It's ridiculous, and it's heartbreaking because you see these kids, I see these kids come in, and this summer is brutal. I have interviewed 15 children who want to come to my school next year. All 15, 100% are on multiple medications. And I'm talking children as young as 4 up to 15. The 15-year-old boy that I interviewed, sweet boy, sweetheart. The mom's like, he's the only one in his private school to pass into 9th grade. The child could not do 100, take away 81. His sentence structure was that of a first grader. And I had to walk out of the office with the mom. So I don't want to say this in front of the kid. I'm like, your son is at a 2nd grade level. It will be impossible for me to give him a diploma in 3 years. Impossible. In the meantime, he's on 2 or 3 different medications. Like, if the medications worked, why are you coming to see me? You know, it's like so unethical. Like, the whole premise of this is, to me, ridiculous. And we're losing our children. And when I see these kids, they come into my office and they're like hollow inside because the drugs, which I point out to the parents, it's under the class called CNS medication, central nervous system.
Right.
And the parents like, oh no, he focuses a lot better. I go, that's not focus. His brain cells are being destroyed. The medication you have him on is attacking his central nervous system at a time when it's growing and developing. You know, if you have a child smoke pot every day from the ages of 4 to 12, it's going to affect him in his adult life. You give a person mind-altering drugs that were made in a lab that shut down or alter their central nervous system, that's permanent. You can't get that back. Anyway, I could go on and on.
No, well, you know what? I was going to say something because in college, I had an experience and I went to my organic chemistry teacher because there were some things I didn't understand. So I went in for extra help at that time. And once we finished that night, his comment to me for having gone to get extra help so I could understand it was that I would never make it in professional school. Very interesting comment because, you know, here I went in for extra help. The funniest thing is I ended up becoming the valedictorian of my dental school at Stony Brook. So what he said was totally, insane. And he actually penalized wanting to learn instead of, helping me to learn or seeing what I didn't understand. The other thing I was going to say is that many of my fellow students in dental school would walk out of a class called histology, which is a study of cells, and we would be totally baffled by what was presented, all of us, at the speed that it was presented at and the words that were thrown at us. And now you're talking about the cumulative GPA of my dental school colleagues, which are all dentists, was 3.7 in college. So you had all these students in dental professional school with a GPA of at least 3.7, and they all walked out of histology class totally baffled, confused, all these emotional reactions. And probably if you tested us at that time, we would have been emotionally distraught because they were so anxious that we were going to have to take a test, and we had no clue what the professor had spoken about. So I think that what you're talking about is important for people to listen to because we need to do something about our education system. And, what I went through and what you're talking about, and now we're talking about not children, we're talking about people who became dental professionals and who already had done well in college. So, you're right. What is it that we're doing? So what happens, I'm curious, when you speak to people or the parents or the psychologists about the drugs, what are the responses that you get?
Well, I had an interesting woman came in. She was a psychologist. She didn't bring her children to me. She just wanted to see me. She had a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, and both children were on medication for 4 years. 4 years. And I go, why? Like, and she goes, well, they were determined to be ADHD in daycare. I'm like, what do we need to do with a 3-year-old? How much focus, how many world problems is a 3-year-old actually solving, right? And she goes, well, that's the way it is. I had no choice. And I don't know if people will agree with what I did, but I'm like, oh, well, 150 years ago or 100 years ago, women couldn't vote. But I guess that was the way it is. African Americans couldn't own property. Oh, but that was how it was. I'm like, stand up. These are your kids. And she started crying. And honestly, I'm like, I'm not sympathetic. I don't have a degree. And I fought. I go, you need to fight. You weren't drugged when your parents didn't drug you because you didn't go to bed on time. You know? So that would be the negative side, because some people don't like to hear it, or it's too much. I don't know if it's too much truth or too much reality, or how I'm somebody who's coming in with a completely different view. I had another family. They came to see
Barbara,
me.
you know what? Barbara, you know what I was going to say is, it's like your shows are so interesting and informative, and unfortunately, we're
out of time.
We've run out of time on the show. So I just want you to very quickly, I want you to give a concluding remark for about a half a minute. What would you like to leave as a remark to the parents out there, to the educators out there? Go ahead.
I would say go back to old school. Reading was reading, math was math, not this Common Core. The children are smarter than what we give them credit for. We don't give homework to kindergartners, first graders, second graders, or third graders. And do what's right by your child. If it doesn't sound right, if putting a pill that's going to alter the central nervous system doesn't sound right to you, don't do it. If getting 3 hours of homework and your child is 5 doesn't sound right to you, complain. Don't do it. If you're a teacher and you're not allowed to teach, right now, homeschooling is huge. That's what I did with no degree. Tell people, I'm going to homeschool. If you, whatever grade you want, start with 5 and charge, and that could be your income. But you don't have.
Well, Barbara, you know what? I'm sorry, because what you're talking about is so important, but you're definitely right. And unfortunately, we've reached the end of the show, but it's been a real pleasure to have you as it was last time. And I want, to those viewers out there, I think the message, the take-home message is, let's really look and see what makes sense. Let's communicate. Let's not penalize communication. Let's not penalize inquisitiveness or activity, because that's normal. And let's move forward. And individual plans are great, but let's base them on something logical. And let's look at the fact that even as adults, sometimes we feel pretty stupid when we don't know something. So let's learn, and let's be a little forgiving and a little more humane. So thank you for being on the show. And for those of you watching, we'll see you again next time on the next episode of A Time for Truth show. Thank you.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet